for you.
Great.
Call the meeting to order for Planning and Zoning Commission and Board of Adjustment.
Did you update them on the lead court thing?
Nope.
Okay, so that's actually for next month, so just disregard that. That's
Which
the
one?
The TAP, the lead court technology. Technical services, that's for next month. Is that at the top of yours?
Yep, it is.
Okay, so just disregard that part. So we will just move right into,
You need to approve the agenda before you go.
sorry.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, so then we're just gonna move into the summit. Carbon solutions, I guess. Tracy, do you wanna go ahead?
Just, ma'am, is it okay if both of us go?
Yeah. I think you're both listed on the agenda.
Yes.
All right, go ahead.
Appreciate you.
Perfect, thanks. Just want to introduce myself. I know you guys have got to meet Trey before. I'm Aaron Eldridge. I'm the project manager with Summit Carbon Solutions for the state of South Dakota. So for the main lines, the laterals, which you guys are a part of, with the 6-inch line running through this county. I've been going around meeting with all the county officials and talking a little bit about the project, hopefully answering some questions that people may have, whether that's construction, operation, design of the project, and how it's going to be implemented. So one, just want to introduce myself, and then two, wanted to talk through a few things. So we gave you guys a new handout today about the project. Just talking about where we're at in South Dakota, we've acquired over 300 miles of right-of-way through strictly voluntary easements to this point. We have signed easement agreements with over 500 landowners in the state of South Dakota. Right now, we have about 790 on the route, so statewide puts us over 64% of our route that we've been able to acquire strictly through voluntary easements at this point.
What do you have in County?
In Han County, we are now at 91.4% of right of way. So we have a significant.
By miles or by landowners?
So we are at 91.4 by miles, 90.6 by landowners. Yep. So we've made a significant jump in that as we continue to progress throughout the project as well. The second sheet that you have, there's a lot of conversation about the regulatory bodies and whether or not this pipeline is regulated and what those requirements are. So that second sheet talks about the PHMSA regulations that we are, and PHMSA is the Pipeline Hazardous Material Safety Administration. That is a part of the DOT that's operated by the federal government, that we are regulated under what's called DOT 195. That goes into more details on that. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you guys may have about that process, about potential changes to those rules and how those might affect us, any of those questions. And then the final sheet you have, probably something you guys have seen before. If not, it's just a map of our route through the county. I know you guys have seen our road crossing permit application, which we're also here to discuss, and that has a map as well. That one just calls out where the actual roads, county roads that we're crossing are, whereas the one you have in front of you does not.
Does your company have experience building carbon sequestration pipelines?
So our company, our engineering team and construction managers alone have over 250 years of experience building pipelines, whether that's gas, crude, all of those. We have not built a carbon sequestration pipeline. But when it comes to pipelines, whether you're putting gas, crude, carbon dioxide, you're shipping ethanol through it, same principles that come into play. And what we have done is partnered up with companies that not only are currently sequestering carbon dioxide through pipelines through wells that are certified. There's a company up in North Dakota that's currently sequestering about 5 million tons a year that we have a partnership with. And we've also partnered with companies such as DNV. So many of the counties along the route have been showed a video of a pipeline rupture that appears to be taking place. You see it from a blimp. That was a study done by this company called DNV that was working on modeling what actually happens when a pipeline, if they see a O2 pipeline were to rupture. They actually had their pipeline at 2,187 pounds of pressure, which is higher than the pressure that we're anticipating, that our line will be rated for when they did that rupture. We have partnered with that company to not only evaluate what would happen in the event of a rupture, but to also make sure our safety standards are up to spec. And one of their senior principal engineers, his name is John Godfrey, he was in charge and a part of that project, has actually submitted written testimony to the South Dakota PUC vouching for the safety of this project in this state. And they have real experience with actually literally putting a bomb on a section of pipe that was pressurized to blow it up and see what happens with that release.
When you say you're partnered with these organizations, exactly what was that? Do you have contractual relations with them?
No, so we have worked with these companies. They do research on these things. We have contacted them and have a working relationship with them to make sure that we are building to their standards. So they do a lot. DNV in particular does a lot with the modeling of pipelines and safety of those pipelines. So we're able to work with them to use their research to help ensure that this pipeline operates safely.
If you use their research and rely on it to operate safely, and all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose, and the way they've steered you turns out to have been wrong, are they liable?
They're not going to be liable for what our company will build because we are regulated by certain requirements. And so what happens, so anytime there would be an event, anytime, let's say it's a tar shut, for instance, because that's one that we're probably all familiar with, an incident that happens in tar shut. PHMSA is going to go through a very extensive process where they will put together a report saying exactly what happened to that project. In the case of Satarsha, it took 2.5 years for them to actually put out that report. Very recently, that report came out. And what they determined was that there were a couple major issues. One, Denbury, the operator of that line, did not account for the geological structures for the ground and the movement that came from a large rainstorm. They had not done a scour analysis of the geotechnical work required to ensure that that pipe was safe. And that they had also done a poor job informing county officials, local residents, and emergency response on what would happen if a pipeline rupture happened and how they'd be able to identify and respond to that. So in a 269-page report that PHMSA released, they came up with a few things. One, Denbury did not follow the standards that we already have put in place. Two, we want to make sure that we have better approaches to making sure that the counties and the emergency response are aware of what would happen in the case of a CO2 release and how quickly they are notified of that. It took over 2 hours for emergency response in Satarsha to actually realize that happened. So then PHMSA puts out the report and they will figure out who's liable and fines will be levied at that point. Denbury was fined over just shy of $4 million for that. They weren't fined because the regulations didn't maintain a safe pipeline. They were fined because Denbury did not hold up to what the regulations said. Even still, PHMSA will look at their regulations after a major incident like that. So we'll go back to 2010. There's a gas gathering pipeline in California, ruptured, ended up with some injuries and some fatalities. PHMSA then undertook an effort to evaluate, like they always do, getting a report out, what actually happened here, who's responsible for what happened here, and two, do we need to change any regulations to make sure that this stands up and that this doesn't happen again? 6 years later, they released the first draft of that rule. 6 years later, 5.5 years, in August of 2021, they sent out what was their final release. Here's what we're actually doing. That's called the PHMSA Mega Rule. In that rule, it's a 3-phased approach where they are now regulating 400,000 miles of pipelines that were previously unregulated. So these are my previous company. We were involved in this. We had pipelines that were not regulated by PHMSA. PHMSA went through the study, determined that there is a safety risk, a hazard for having these unregulated pipelines. They brought those under. Those pipelines are not grandfathered in. They were required to follow new standards. So how do you do that? You have a pipeline in the ground. It's built to standards that were made in the 60s, 70s, 80s. We have new standards now. What they can't do, what they don't do, I should rather say, They're not gonna make you dig up a 600-mile pipeline and stick a new one next to it. But what they do and what they're requiring on that mega rule, again, 12 years after that incident took place, it actually comes into place this May, so closer to 13 years after that incident took place. They're requiring the operators to re-pressure test those pipelines, establishing the maximum operating pressure based off of those new pressure tests that they have. So they can't require them to put in a stronger, better pipe, but what they can do is lower the amount of pressure and volume and flow that's enabled in those lines to make sure they're up to spec with the modern specs. So they can't make them dig up the pipeline, they're not going to do that, but they will make sure that the safety of these lines is of the utmost importance and something that operators do. And I, again, from my previous company, that was a big thing that we were spending a ton of money and time to make sure that we're obeying those rules and getting those pipes up to spec. So, very long answer, I apologize for that, but the short version is PHMSA will review, do a report, and if Summit has the liability for Summit's pipeline. That's what it comes down to in our easements. We have indemnification for landowners. For part of the PUC, they'll give us requirements if we get the permit from them based on previous pipelines. They will require us to have that indemnification as well, which we do already have. But Summit is required to indemnify and be liable for our pipeline and anything that would happen from an incident involving our pipeline.
And if Summit is bankrupt, there is no mechanism in place to make anybody whole, correct?
There are certain bonds that are required by different states. I am unfortunately not an attorney. I can't speak for the exact bonds that are required by South Dakota. I do know that we have bonding requirements as part of that PUC process, at least for construction. I unfortunately cannot speak for years down the road. I'm not sure what that process looks like. I will try to get an answer for you, but I'd be lying if I said I knew right now.
Do we know who owns Summit Carbon Solutions?
Summit Carbon Solutions has a parent company named Summit Agriculture that's based out of Iowa as well. It's a private company. We have investors like any public or private company does have. No private investor has any more than a 10% stake that I'm aware of in the company. And it's mostly owned by, we have some environmental sustainability groups, they're called ESG funds, based here in the US. We have some ethanol plant partners. John Deere is a large partner with us. Continental Resources is a large partner with us. And then the one that most people like to ask about and are aware of is we do have a investor. It's called South Korea EK. I should know that right off the top of my head, I'm drawing a blank, but it's a energy company in South Korea that invests heavily in the United States. In fact, they were in the White House later last year with President Biden investing $20 billion in future infrastructure in the United States.
Is there a prohibition against China buying the whole thing, livestock and barrel from the other stockholders?
So if our company were to, there's a process, it's the CFIUS, and again, I should know what that means off the top of my head. It's an entity within the federal government that anytime a U.S. asset is potentially being sold to a foreign asset, it has to be reviewed by the CFIUS in the same way if there's two major companies merging, so JetBlue and Spirit are trying to merge, and the department, I don't know the name, I just read it this morning, but they're suing them as an antitrust laws type thing. Same process, the U.S. government has to review that.
Are they the same who did the review when Smithfield was bought out by China?
I couldn't speak for that. I'm not familiar with Smithfield, so I couldn't speak for that. What I do know is that any company or any entity that would potentially, years down the road, take ownership of this pipeline, if that was something that were to occur, every single thing that's written in the easement language with the landowner has to be upheld. Every single part of that, every single agreement they have with the PUC has to be upheld. And that if, our easements talk about one single pipeline only carrying CO2, if any of that were to be changed, all easements would have to be renegotiated, all permits would have to be renegotiated.
I thought you said you weren't a lawyer.
I'm not.
How do you know that?
I work with a lot of lawyers, and if I've asked the question in advance, I can answer those questions. Unfortunately, there's questions that I haven't asked yet, and so when I get asked that, I can make assumptions, but I prefer not to do that.
So are the easements boilerplate or are they specific to each landowner?
We do have a standard easement that we do send out to landowners, but there's language that we do negotiate with specific we negotiate with all landowners. The whole thing is a process. I'm actually not aware of anyone who just agreed to the basic easement language. And generally what that is, we're working with landowners to make route adjustments across their property to ensure that we're trying to avoid shelter belts, future expansion plans that they have, if we can. Potentially future plans for drain tile. We'll go deeper with that pipe. We have pretty strong indemnification language. If they want very specific instances indemnified, that's language we can put a very specific, line in there that this won't cause this or whatnot. That's already covered in our blanket easement, but if they have a very specific thing they'd like, we can get that added in. So I would say all of them have been negotiated to some extent. We do have a blanket easement with indemnification language, restoration language, different things that are all, we would call the boilerplate language, but I'm not aware of any landowner across the entire project that did not negotiate with us on that.
And they're all of them in perpetuity?
Correct.
And so in the event that, for whatever reason, the pipeline gets abandoned or does the easement cease to exist, or?
Great question. That's part of the negotiation process. The majority of landowners have in their easement what's called an abandonment clause. So if the pipeline were to be abandoned for 5 years, then that easement would be null and void. All that would go back to the landowner.
Why does a minority not have it?
That's part of that negotiation language in there. And if a landowner had requested that, there was no debate, we would put that in. But that's just not part of the standard language, and that's also not part of the standard pipeline easement language that you'll see across different projects.
Are you familiar with the earthquake history in this part of the world?
I am not personally, no.
We just celebrated, I think it was the 10th or the 20th anniversary of 4.2, 4.7 earthquake here. What was that in the pipeline?
Yeah, so actually, earthquakes generally don't have as bad of an effect on pipelines as people would assume, because the ground, there are certain cases, I want to be very clear, there are certain cases where an earthquake just kind of rips the ground in half. Anything in the way is going to have damage. We are certainly not immune to that. I want to make that very clear, right? There is almost any circumstance we could come up with an opportunity for this pipeline to be damaged in an absolute worst case scenario. I will be very clear with that. I don't want to try to ignore that. In general, what tends to happen with earthquakes is not the fact that the earth is ripping apart, but it's the movement of it all as a whole that causes damage to above ground structures, that causes buildings to be damaged. It's not a ripping, it's this movement that buildings aren't necessarily prepared for. What that movement actually does is for a below ground structure that is not above ground and doesn't have a lot of room to wiggle, it just kind of moves with the ground. And it's incredible to see when you're putting in a pipeline, especially a 6-inch pipeline, how flexible that pipe can be when you're laying it in. I know if you have a small section, it doesn't seem that way. But yeah, there's certainly risks associated based on that, but in general, below ground structures tend to be all right with earthquakes. It's more of the above ground ripping things up, falling over, looking like that. But I'd be lying to you if I said there's not a single instance of natural disaster, any use that could cause damage to this pipeline and could cause an incident in that way. So I won't make that statement.
I've got a question in regards to the easements. I watched a video from a county commissioners meeting in North Dakota, and I have not looked at any of our easements in Hammond County. There were 2 North Dakota certified surveyors at this county commissioners meeting, and they had great concerns with the easements because they said the easements that Summit was signing with people, they said for a pipeline right of way, they said that easement has to basically be pinned at one end and the opposite end of a quarter. And your 50-foot operational right of way or your 100-foot construction right of way, it has to be defined. These 2 certified surveyors from North Dakota said the easements that are being signed have no definition of that pipeline crossing a quarter of land. The way the easements are worded, and a lot of people are blindly trusting Summit and citing these easements, that Summit has an easement to that whole quarter of ground. They basically can do what they want, where they want, without any definition of where that pipeline crosses. Like I
It's just
said,
in meets and bounds.
Pardon?
It is in meets and bounds.
They said that they are defining a 50-foot, easement for operation of that pipeline. They said there has to be pins set
Yeah.
and specific measurements. And they said that's not the way the easements are worded. The easements are worded that they cover the whole quarter ground, but each quarter section, that they said these people are fools to sign these easements. They said they're giving Summit Carbon Solutions right away to that whole quarter of ground to do what they want, where they want. And, I don't know, like I said, I have not looked at any of our easements to see if any of these have been surveyed by a South Dakota certified surveyor. I don't know, I have not looked at any of them. But that concerns me. I've made the statement before when Summit was here that I fully understand who I work for. I work for the residents of Ann County, not for Summit Carbon Solutions, and I want to make certain that this pipeline is, if it goes in, is absolutely as safe as it can be, that it's done right, that our landowners are not taken advantage of by some big corporation with all the money in the world. And when they realize that they've been taken, all they get is a tough lot. I won't tolerate that. It's been brought to my attention, and I spoke with our state's attorney this morning just after a little after 11 o'clock. In our zoning ordinance, Article 5, Section 509, prohibited uses and structures. It reads, all other uses and structures which are not specifically permitted or not permissible as conditional uses shall be prohibited from the agricultural district, which Ann County is all zoned agricultural. One of our early meetings with Summit, Commissioner Jones asked one of the higher ups from Summit, his statement to him was, I'm not even sure if this pipeline complies with our conditional use permit or our zoning ordinance. And the exact quote from that individual was, your zoning ordinance means nothing to us. I think that is very arrogant, I'm gonna double that. That's very, very arrogant for a corporation to come into Ann County and tell us that our zoning ordinance means nothing. That is a zoning ordinance that is put together by and for the people of Ann County. And if Summit Carbon Solutions doesn't think that the people of Ann County have a voice in what goes in and where it goes and how it's put in, they probably are gonna have a day in court with us. That's my opinion. Our attorney said if you're asking for a permit to cross our right of ways, he says this is premature, and he said I could relay this information. It's premature. You don't have all your easements with our landowners. You don't have a permit from the South Dakota PUC, and it would be my opinion that this should be one of the last things we do. This can be on any monthly agenda. We don't have to, it's my understanding, we don't have to have hearings for it or anything else. When all the pieces of the puzzle are in place, someone can come to us and request to cross our right of ways, and we vote as a majority, or the majority of us vote to approve it. I think this is the last piece of the puzzle for me. I stated this last time that this was requested of us. I do not want this board, now I'm only one voice of five, I do not want this board to make it look like we are somehow taking the side of some carbon solution over our landowners who some still oppose this, and they're very vocal about the fact that they don't want this. They do not want it across their land. The legislature failed to protect our landowners with eminent domain. I don't know. I can't get on board with any approval of Summit Carbon Solutions carbon pipeline until our landowners are on board, the PUC has approved it, and I think our zoning ordinance does apply. I don't care what this gentleman, I don't remember what his name was, I don't care what his opinion is, he doesn't get to tell us what our zoning ordinance affects and doesn't affect.
We were also told at the first meeting, if you recall, right out of the.
5 minutes into the conversation.
5 minutes into the conversation, that eminent domain would be accessed if it became necessary. After you told us that the zoning board was completely irrelevant to this process. I think you have to partner up with, instead of all these experts on building and maintaining pipeline, a PR firm. Because your public relations effort is pathetic.
I will say that yours has been less abrasive than some of the early contacts that we had with some. If there was something that made me dig my heels on something, it was a few of those first contacts with the Summit Corporation. I've got no time for that kind of arrogance and bullying of the county commission. It is not up to Summit to determine what our zoning ordinance applies to. They can tell us. They said we're regulated by the federal government, your zoning ordinance means nothing to us. That is arrogance beyond compare.
I just mean that personal.
Absolutely.
Yes, I
Totally understand.
One more question.
Absolutely.
Is the extent of the capitalization of the indemnification structure in place limited to those monies that are posted as bonds that are required by government? Do you have private insurance?
We do.
To what extent?
I would have
What
to
are the
look that
limits?
up.
I mean, if you have an earthquake and you've got, my God, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of damage, are you guys in any position to cover those kinds of damages? What are the assets of your corporation?
Yeah, and that's something I'll have to look up the exact numbers on. I'm happy to do so. I know we're required to have certain numbers and certain limits of that insurance. I do not know that number off the top of my head. So one thing I'll make sure I can do is find those answers to you guys and get those to you, because I can't speak, I trust what you guys are saying, because I have heard from many people that our first approach was not a good approach. And I certainly apologize on behalf of anyone who heard that. That's not how I would want to do. And if that's what the company was telling me, I quite frankly wouldn't be at this company. And it's just my word, so that, that's just where it is. But I do apologize that took place. I can assure you that today, if I said those things, that sounds like I wouldn't have a job tomorrow. I mean, I can assure you of that. So there are certain people that probably can say those things and get away with it. I'm not one of those, and I can assure you that our approach has changed there. So I genuinely apologize for what that happened. What would be helpful for us is, so, if you're going to build, say you want to build a new gymnasium or something, right? You have to get permits for that. There's kind of this give and take on your design process and you're actually getting the permits. Because you don't want to spend all this money getting the design process and find out that your permits require you to do a lot of other things as well. So what we're really looking for on this is we're trying to get these permits looked at. It's just some guidance that says, hey, if you get these things done that are unrelated to these permits, here's what we'd be willing to accept with respect to these permits. Because that helps me as I'm designing this project. That says, all right, if we can get this other stuff, these other thresholds met, here's what we can, I have confidence that I can work to design and procure materials and do whatever is needed to make this happen. So that would be my request from you guys. If you're able to give me something like that, or even just look over those permits and say, as the permit stands, what we see in here, we're okay with this from this standpoint. We have other reasons why we would not prefer to approve this. And we, have counties that consider approving pending PUC permit or going ahead and approving pending other stuff. Not even necessarily asking for that, just asking for kind of a verbal thing that says, hey, you can go ahead and continue to plan on designing like this, but before we approve, we would like to see these other things. That would really help me out as I continue to work and process that. So that would be my biggest request.
Do you think someone would agree to 100% voluntary easements?
I don't believe so. Just being
That
frank.
answers a tough question for me, because Because like I said, I've stated it before, I've stated it again today, I fully understand who I work for. I'm a representative of the people of Van County. If the people of Van County have concerns, I have concerns, and I will relay those concerns. This discussion of eminent domain has been a really tough hurdle for me right from the beginning. By God, these people bought that land, they paid for it, they own it, they have title to it, and for a private corporation or a group of investors to come in and start throwing around the discussion of eminent domain, 5 minutes into our very first contact with them, like I said, if you want to talk about something that'll make me dig my heels in, that will be it. I've got zero time or tolerance for pushy, arrogant corporate business. And them to tell us that, I apologize, I don't remember what the gentleman's name was, but for him to tell us that your zoning ordinance means nothing to us, that is outright bullying, and I won't stand for it. And I will repeat what I told you earlier. Your approach today has been not abrasive at all. It's informational, and I understand your job is salesmanship. You're supposed to be convincing county commissions, to get on board. But for me, I've got to have voluntary support from every impacted landowner along that line. That's where I'm drawing the line. I wish the legislature would have stepped up and worked for the people of South Dakota instead of corporate investment. That's my honest take on that. I think they failed the people of South Dakota, and now the county commissions have said, well, let's hope the legislature takes care of it. Now it's back on our plate. Now we're back to, does our zoning ordinance protect our citizens? I just had a thought this morning, and we'll throw the idea out. Maybe we put this approval of this pipeline going across Van County on the 24 ballot and let the citizens of Van County decide. Why? Who has more voice than we, the people of Van County? This notion that the federal government oversees us. Please step out of our way. I've got no time for it. Zero time.
I don't think the voters of Hand County should be deciding what happens to Farmer Brown's property. It's his property,
Good
not
point.
ours,
Good point.
and not the corporations.
Yeah,
It's
good
his
point.
property.
To your question, I guess I don't know if we're ready to commit one way or the other, in my opinion, but.
That was our state's attorney's recommendation. He says, this is premature to make any commitment. He said he would look at this article of the zoning ordinance. He felt our zoning ordinance does come into play here. And so Alton promised to take a look at it, so I will trust you to do that. But to make any kind of agreement today, he said was premature, so. For me personally, and I always tell people, I'm one vote of 5 sitting at this table. For me personally, I want to see 100% voluntary easements. This discussion of eminent domain, I've got no time for it.
It isn't about the project.
No.
Do you have any
Some-
more information that you would want to give us?
I guess back to the original question, you might have just touched on this. Is there anything you guys would be able to give us that would help me at least with the planning process? I appreciate the conversation we've been able to have. I certainly appreciate understanding where you guys are coming from.
Give you this,
But
you haven't said no.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
I think once our landowners are on board and with the PUC, we have to trust our PUC some, maybe we do too much, but if the landowners are on board, the PUC is on board, I don't see why we would not approve crossing our right of ways, but I just, when the landlords come and sit here and look at us for help, I just don't know. That's the people we work for. That's the people that elect us. That's the people that pay the taxes that sign our paycheck. I fully understand who I work for, and until they're all on board with it, I can't be. So.
I think, for right now, I don't think we're at a point where we can give you an answer to your question.
Yeah.
I'd say we need to discuss it more, and, I did have a landowner call me, and he couldn't understand why you would want, a crossing permit before you got the PUC go-ahead. And that was his strong take, and, his name is, Jay Poindexter. So, I mean, he called me this morning and we talked, and we really haven't, on other projects, we haven't given permissions for right-of-ways until the PUC has signed off on it. That's just of the different projects we've had. And I don't see why we should start changing now all of a sudden. So if there's nothing more, I guess that's where we're at. I think as a board, if I'm reading the board right, I think that's where we're at right now.
I think Elton, reviewing our zoning ordinance and giving us advice on whether our zoning ordinance does apply in this situation will help us a lot too.
Well, I appreciate your guys' time, and I totally understand, we get the cart before the horse conversation a lot, and so I hope I was able to shed some light on why we're doing that, to help with planning and stuff. Obviously, I understand time is valuable for everybody, and so I'm not gonna try to hop on the agenda every time you guys meet. But if it'd be all right with you guys, in a month or so, maybe hop back on, and I know sometimes I call a state's attorney and they say, I can't talk to you, like, you know, which I understand, they can't give me legal advice. It's helpful for us to have the back and forth to understand. Our attorneys can tell us one thing, your attorneys tell you another. Would you guys be all right with me getting back on an agenda in a month, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, to see what steps forward might look like for us with respect to?
Myself, until you get the PUC, go ahead, I don't really see any need to come in front of us. Once the PUC is signed off on it, then I guess you should come in front of us again.
Okay.
I think that would be, rather than to have this conversation every time, and it looks to me like that's kind of what we're butting up against. But that's just my take. Hopefully I'm speaking kind of for the board.
I would agree with that, and like I said, I would like to, someone told us our zoning ordinance means nothing to them. I would like our state's attorney to advise us on that, because it, like I said, I'm just being 100% honest, as I always am in this job. When this got referred to the legislature for clarification about whether carbon capture pipelines were a public entity or whatever, they failed the citizens of South Dakota on that one. That's my opinion. It's only my opinion, but now the pressure is coming back to the county commissions again. The landowners are asking for protection, and like I said, I fully understand who I work for. Someone can give us all the sales pitch they want, but we represent the people. I believe Laura's got a question.
The public purpose of this place would be paving the way for millionaires and billionaires to acquire tax write-offs. That's the public purpose of the search. As I understand it.
Yeah, probably right, Lou.
So I mean, we've got a full agenda ahead of us today, and it's time to.
Laura's got a question.
I just wanted to ask, our different counties, what's the thickness of the pipes? You said 6 inch?
So the diameter of the pipe in this county is 6 inch. In South Dakota, it can go up to 24 inch.
So what determines the size of the pipeline? The
Absolutely.
thickness? Yeah.
Absolutely, great question. So there's an equation that when I say we, I refer to every pipeline, that refers to the thickness of a wall for a pressure vessel, which a pipeline is. So based on the pressure and diameter and material strength, there's a certain requirement for the thickness of that pipe. What we do is, as part of PHMSA, you're required to go above and beyond what your max operating pressure is. So when we put this pipeline in the ground, before we would ever put CO2 in it, you actually have to pressure the entire thing up with water to 125% that max pressure for 8 hours. And if there's any leaks, you have to drain the entire thing down, find that leak, repair it, repressurize the entire thing. So what we do is we use those percentages. We know what our max operating pressure is. You plug that into that equation, which, to be honest with you, I'm sure there's a name for the equation. I just know it as the pressure vessel wall thickness equation. If you Google that and find it, that determines what your minimum wall thickness is going to be based on the strength of the material and, again, your pressure and diameter from that. So, like I said, I should know the name. I'm an engineer. I know the numbers, unfortunately, not the name. So. I appreciate you guys' candor today. Thank you for letting us speak. I can share my card if you guys have any questions. If you're getting questions from landowners, the gentleman you referenced, very familiar, we spoke with him multiple times. But if there's anyone, whether they're a landowner or just a citizen of the county, feel free to have them reach out to me, send me an email. I'm happy to talk with anyone. You know,
Leave your card.
absolutely, will do. I'll grab those. So again, I really appreciate your candor and your time. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So past that now, I don't have a report myself. Doug has attached the South Dakota Department of Ag and Natural Resources report for the Millardale County Inland Management System and certification. I think that's just an informative correspondence letter. I believe we are, Doug, yes, we have the plan?
Susie said that she has, but they're missing a couple signatures.
Okay. So, what you got?
I just forgot to have you sign on this one, you find it everywhere else, but.
Okay, so we can get in the
Yeah,
and sign
yeah,
that.
please come in.
So we have all three then?
The other ones that.
Yep.
Are
Okay,
all three in order?
yes.
Are there any issues that you think we should concern ourselves with?
The one has a easement that will probably have some long.
Hold on, long edition, okay?
And access easement.
Yeah,
It does have a.
They're going to get one.
and access easement.
There is an access point to it, but it's on their parents' ground to be able to, but they are going to be working with lawyer to get it, so it's good. We've had that before.
So would it be premature to?
No, it wouldn't, because we've done,
I don't believe so. It's a child getting land platted out from them, from their parents. So I don't think it would be premature at all, Jim.
We don't need to approve it within this.
No.
Do pass.
Yeah.
Any questions on any of the three of them?
Move it ahead to those other guys, Doug.
Pardon me?
Move it ahead to those other guys. Jamie, I've got a question. This will be going back, to the, easements. And maybe Susie can help answer this. Do you guys have a recommendation of who do we talk to make sure, on that question about the surveys, and maybe helping with some protection for our landowners? Who would we talk to find out if these easements actually do cover the whole quarter ground? Because, like I said, these two certified surveyors in North Dakota said that thing really has to be, surveyed and pinned. And they said they're not doing that up there. They're just.
I can look and see who did the preparing of the documents, I thought it was out here.
Seems to me
I've
those
only
are
added
private
them.
matters between.
Right, I don't know why we would just
I
get
did not.
ourselves mixed into that, but.
Okay.
And I feel like I'm with you on that. It's an education of your own self. You own the land. If you're gonna sign an agreement with another company,
Yep.
you should have education on they are doing their due diligence as well as yourself as a landowner.
Yep.
To know what you're signing.
For us to do it would be overreach, basically. I mean, I would think.
Can't answer that.
That would, if I were the landowner being approached, I would do my own education and educate myself on what I was signing. and to be sure that the company was doing what they're supposed to be doing. That's my opinion. Yeah. So,
Thank you.
any other questions? Okay.
Guess that brings us to the public comment portion.
We're all ears.
I guess I just visited with the Pike County zoning administrator this morning, and she shared that, yes, they do have a separate zoning board who is appointed by the county commission, who then kind of does the legwork, especially like as you're rewriting the zoning ordinance or as applications come in, just some other people to participate in the details of that process. And I think they feel like it works very effectively in Hyde County. I haven't researched other counties, but I think it's something to consider.
I think we'll consider it. I'm not opposed to it. You know, right off the bat, I'm not sold on the
Does
concept.
the zoning administrator, serve on that board? Do you know?
She said they have one commissioner and four appointed residents. I'm not sure that the administrator is.
State law lays that out, that it's, one commissioner, four appointed zoning board members.
Correct, and the Board of Adjustment is still the county commission.
Appreciate that. Anything else? If nothing else, we're gonna move on. I would entertain a
Motion
motion
to
to
adjourn this planning and zoning.
Mean or convene? He used my, I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.
So we're meeting, we are now meeting the county commission.
I don't have any recommendations or changes for the agenda presented to you guys.
Do we need a motion to approve the
Yes.
final agenda? So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none?
Okay, ready to move on? Okay, Randy couldn't be here, he's available by phone if need be, but what he's looking for is just permission to do his annual notice of intent to inspect noxious weeds. And then there's also an advertisement in the Miller Press for seasonal health, the advertisement to seek bids for chemical supplies, and then an advertisement for the info show, which this year will be held in Herald. There's several counties participating together. Pardon me?
What is it again?
It's like, they used to have it in the Three Heights Auditorium, and there was an opportunity for producers to get together with suppliers and talk about current trends and such things. But now they've joined with, I think it's Family Fuse and Sully. Maybe it's just Hughes, Sully, and then Hand High, so it's in Herald. And not everybody's thrilled with it being in Herald.
So for one county, just for the one that went.
Do you need a motion for that, or just?
Yeah, he would like your blessing to do that. It's past the weed border.
We had all but one weed board member at the meeting the other night on the weed board. Motion to approve all of these, passing to the county commission.
I make motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none?
On your consent agenda for acknowledgements, I did include the revenue and expenditure budget reports through the end of February for you to review if you're here. Payroll ledgers in there, as it is every month, the library board minutes from January 23rd. The registrar's statement of fees I have to insert that and hold it until next month because I didn't get it linked on the agenda, but that's more of a ministerial approval. And then receipt of the week past board minutes from March, which again came after I published the agenda, so I wasn't able to link it in there. So those two items, we really won't be approving because they'll be on the next agenda. And then as far as approvals, there's a series of travel requests. Sheriff Cronin wants to attend the annual Spring Sheriff's Conference in Deadwood. There's a request for Chelsea Price to attend the Sex Offender Registry Conference, also in Deadwood. For Deputy Fisher and the K-9 to attend their annual recertification in Falls. We'll be approving the minutes of the February 21st meeting, plural. Payment of claims and vouchers, travel requests for the treasurer, the registrar, and myself to go to New Officials Workshop in Pier on April 19th and 20th. And then I had repeated for some reason the minutes.
Doug, is there any need, choosing the consent agenda address the subject matter of your email the other day that we requested a special meeting for purposes of budgetary consideration?
Well, the thought was is whether or not you wanted to accelerate the awarding of bids for the fuel, because Ag Tech has already expressed interest in renewing the contract. And so if you wanted a special meeting between now and April, just to approve that, we're gonna open those bids on the 15th.
Yes.
So that doesn't need to be in the consent agenda?
No,
Okay. I move we approve the consent agenda.
I will second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried.
and this is where you do the flats.
I move we approve.
You wanna make,
One at a
I
time.
Oh,
was gonna say, do you wanna be the mover on all three of them?
okay.
I will second all three. That works for you.
It does. If it works with the others, it works with me.
Okay, with you guys.
All those in favor of the flats?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none.
And then this is your appointment. I have not heard. Is Jamie still here?
She's going to look for her.
No, you can just ask her if the, CNC has met and if they have a recommendation for them. That was where we left that off, but that was only 2 weeks ago, so. The other one's the designation of the Family Crisis Center. That's the resolution that's in Luke's folder. And that is to show, to designate them as the entity that we want serving Ham County.
Except we don't need to implement today.
Oh, so yeah, that I,
Yeah. So I have it on my agenda next week.
okay, we'll move that to April.
I would make a motion to approve resolution 2023-07.
I'll second.
This is in the absence of the information with us with the annual report.
Right.
This will be a roll call?
Yep.
Aye.
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 Yeah, my correspondence with them, she's still putting it together. Looks like you will.
What's that?
Looks like you.
Okay. Well, it's a big day. They have started on the elevator car is now missing. So it's out in the dumpster. So,
I didn't take all of it.
No. Do you want to start? I got.
Well,
Yes,
you
sir.
want to hold up for a second? Yep. You'll fill in the rest when you just want me to sign.
Yes. I have a question. What is the disposition of the debris? Because like there's that big electric motor and I didn't know, like, you know, like when they tear down schools, people can have mementos if somebody wants to push the button out of the wall.
Well, I ain't gonna say the push button out of the wall, but everything else, unless somebody wants it, kind of scrap.
Are we into the glass too? It's still there.
No, they're going to, there are some people that want, I know, there's the painter wants, it turned out the painter wants the glass. If we can get, you know, I hadn't even thought of that, came up in conversation yesterday.
Right, because that's a property issue where you have to be part surplus or you exchange it for service.
And I didn't even think of that.
Because like that motor itself, I don't know what a
100-year-old.
No, it's not. We replaced that motor and the cable.
Oh, okay.
It's about 30 or so now. Multiple times,
They came after me, I'm only in 28 years.
okay, so it was 25.
Whenever Joey Kendall got stuck in there.
Now,
It was when Joey Kendall got stuck in there.
there is a elevator museum in New Jersey, and I attempted to contact them multiple times through email and the telephone, and they never responded to the phone, message, and they never responded to the email. Tell look, if there's anything you want, but the decorative stuff that we could save, I'm gonna put in one of the cases someplace. The other stuff, I hadn't even, well, I guess we need to, how do we need to do it? Advertise it that, on the website that we've got this stuff? Put it,
You can, I mean. like-
and suggest it to the newspaper.
I hadn't thought of it until you just said that it's going in the dumpster.
Well, most of it is old, ugly, and worn out and greasy. It's just, nobody wanted it. What they yanked out of there this morning, nobody wanted it unless they wanted to do something, make some kind of backstop or something. It was,
Still finding to be declared surplus.
So even if we throw it away enough?
Yeah.
Just like a 1980s computer, no one wants it, but it's still gotta be declared surplus.
So what do we?
I mean,
Well, I'm just wondering if like, like a gate, if somebody wanted the gate or, I mean, obviously if they tear the car apart and cut it up with a chisel or whatever, they have to value it.
Can we just make a blanket declaration that it is all surplus?
I think so. It's not on the agenda, but we can put it on April. But
So
if you all agree, then at least the contractors will know how to preserve something.
they would know that it has to be conserved until it's dealt with.
The highway department.
As surplus property.
Yeah.
Throw it away. We don't-
Because it's kind of like the front doors, when he said that, that was what came to my head was the front doors were laying safe for them. And then 15 years later, they were surplus and stolen. Because nobody showed any interest in it, in the interim.
Could we just pass a motion, to the effect that we want to save all of it and not dispose of any of it until we made a decision as to whether or not we want to kind of peddle it, hold it, surplus it, auction it?
That's all fine and dandy, but we do not want to hold this project up one.
Just hold on to it.
here's what I would suggest, is that we've got, everything is going into that dumpster out there right now. So, except for some items. The only thing that I can think of that is going to be, that anybody possibly is gonna want is the motor. Maybe some of the controls upstairs for some reason, just to look at. And the brass plaques that contain the control button. And those I was gonna say,
But he says we can't just dispose of that stuff.
exactly. But what I'm suggesting is that, the
Yeah.
other stuff is scrap, and deal with it as scrap, but, the motor and the decorative stuff, we'll just go ahead and set aside.
That's right.
And then we'll deal with it as we want. And you guys decide, we'll deal with it, but everything else is scrap.
Can we just give Doug and Will the permission or authority to set aside what they think somebody may want or would have some value?
We use their judgment, their discretion,
Right.
determining what.
Well, that's what we can do now. I mean, it just came to me when he said that about it all going in the dumpster.
I never thought about those expanding,
Yeah, I don't think.
so somebody might.
I think getting them out of there,
Right.
I may be mistaken, but I think about an hour ago, getting them out of there destroyed them.
Oh.
But I will double check on that.
I'm just thinking that if those items were recently, a capital asset owned by the county, there must be a paper record of their disposition.
No, I agree, honestly, I hadn't thought about it, so I put it up here.
My biggest concern is where you're gonna put this. These certain items that you
Well,
want to see, where are you gonna put them? And my biggest concern on this whole deal is,
Don't slow it down.
don't slow them down one
Well,
bit.
let me reiterate, the only thing that I think that the only thing that I think that we're gonna save is, or that is savable, are the brass ornaments and the motor. Now, the motor is gonna be setting up in the penthouse until the middle of next week, and the middle of next month is the earliest. But everything else, I think you just need to go through the process of surplusing it, and it turns into scrap.
But can't we declare it scrap now and not surplus it?
Well, whatever the process is, I mean,
Yeah, we'll
the
follow
end
that.
result is it all goes into the dumpster and it gets hauled off to the railroad side.
Right now, it's being scrapped.
In the interim, I think his motion was,
Our
or
motion.
give you guys the judgment, or excuse me, the discretion to segregate these items and, determine what we need to keep and not keep.
Yeah, it's a short list.
Okay. I say
Short
we're-
list.
And the only thing that's gonna take up any space is the motor, and it's gonna take about as much space as one of these chairs.
What?
We'll find a place to store it.
I think it gives them the authority to put it through.
Michelle?
All those in favor?
With the elevator in mind, if you look on the last two pages, we have two change orders. We had discussed this at the last elevator meeting, forward copies of this to the elevator committee. And the first one, change order number one, that is the addition to put engraved fire pictorial signs instead of putting tacking a plastic fire signs to the wall up there. These are the nice engraved ones that'll match the decor on the elevator doors.
Is it rail on them too?
That's my understanding, I believe so.
You're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And they're 29.70.
No, they're 21, let's see, I'm looking at 2175. The last, go to the last two pages. I started at the back, sorry.
Do we need to approve each of these change orders individually by motion?
Yeah, because they presented them as separate orders.
Move to approve change order number one.
Hold on a second.
Well, the very last two pages.
Yeah, the very last two pages I got, but the one where my signature goes is, for the, what we're talking about. They're at 29.70.
Funeral prices.
No, that is for the boiler. I got the elevator, the boiler, and the generator here.
Yeah, you'll be signing the one that looks like that up on the screen. There's a thing at the bottom that says accepted by.
So that is for the boiler servicing.
I will add to my motion, to approve change order number one at the price of $2,175.
I was looking at the wrong.
Pardon?
I was looking at the wrong thing.
If that's your motion, second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay. Change order number two is, removing the existing 60-foot, antenna tower that, it is not used for anything but a platform to hold the weather station, directional antenna, and, whoever runs the camera that's up there is
They would notice to get rid of it.
so.
You mean we're not gonna have a courthouse cam anymore?
The last I heard is that hoping to move it to the water.
Is that taller?
It actually is. So, yeah, now, two things are going on here. One is that there's gonna be quite a bit of coordination, and I will do that to make sure all that stuff gets off there. And there's also the issue of the vertical obstruction beacon, is that my understanding is with a 60-foot mast on top of this building, we have to have the red light, the vertical obstruction beacon. We have to have it up there. However, we're right next to the hospital and a helicopter pad.
Yeah.
The smaller mast is low enough, I understand, by FAA standards, this is what I've been told, that we don't need it up there. But considering we literally got helicopters flying in and taking sick people out, I think we need to confer with Avera and see what they want to do. And I recommend that we just go ahead and put the vertical obstruction beacon back up there.
What's the harm? Honestly, it'd be strictly safety.
When they approached me about it, they wanted it on corners of the building.
The corners of the line, why is that?
Because when they come in, they're gonna hit the closest obstruction to the pad is that corner. But if they see the four corners, then they know to avoid the whole thing. That's why like in Sioux Falls, you see all the buildings marked on the corner.
Oh. This is unrelated completely to the elevator, correct?
Well, no, it's unrelated to the elevator. The reason that we're doing it is because they've gotta have a crane up here in a month to get all of their equipment, the new motor up there, the old motor out. And one of their issues was that it was gonna be very difficult to do that around the mast. And then we learned that the mast is no longer used and we can get rid of it.
And
So-
the Wagner's report.
I'm sorry about that, Jim, I never explained that to you. That's, I mean, we've been going through this process, the opportunity was here to get rid of a problem for them working on the elevator and to get rid of a problem for ourselves. That's,
And if we just did it ourselves, we could at least double this price.
There's no roof issues by taking this down.
No.
Who's gonna take the antenna out for the?
Total Strut Construction Solutions, have talked with the crane company, and we're gonna pay Total Construction Solutions to do this.
Okay.
But, they talked with the crane company, and they found a subcontractor that specializes in removing and placing radio masts.
and to be, honest, and that we're wrapping this into the cost of the elevator.
We have no reason
Yeah, sure we can.
Okay.
And having a crane already here on site.
Right, save
It
us.
costs us way more than this, if we have to bring a crane back in, we'll just utilize the crane that's already here.
It should be twice as much, right?
Well, the biggest advantage is they don't have to try to navigate around the tower or the guy wires if it's gone.
Good to me.
Because that's how it was approached to us, that one of our elevator meetings that.
But we still have no reason that we would want to use that down the road.
No.
For any service.
We have another one on the east side of the building.
Arlen was even included in this discussion about
Whether you,
what we would need to. I'll make a motion to approve change order number 2 at a dollar amount of $7,769.
So this something we're also gonna have to surplus?
If it survives, yeah.
Like that motion.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
One, two follow, what do we need to do about surplusing it? And the other thing, I will be a good neighbor and call Vera and find out exactly what they want and what is actually reasonable about vertical construction.
Yeah, because we weren't required to put it up there, it was just good neighbor.
I would think it might have some scrap that.
Oh, I know, I'm sure it does, but what do we need, I mean, I'm not throwing this kind of stuff away before, what do we actually need to do about it, Doug?
Just get it down and then we'll decide this disposition afterwards.
We're not the lot.
I would put it out wherever the county has their scrap iron pile and throw it on that.
Okay. So, things are proceeding, they should have the elevator torn out in, 2 weeks, and, 2 weeks from, Monday, but past Monday, they should be, they should start work on the pad and the pit. So we're progressing on it. Moving on to the first page, GNR control. This is this has been budgeted for, both of these items have been budgeted for. This is our, service contract. We've had a service contract 3 or 4 years with, GNR control. They come out, and if you look on page 7, the total price is $2,970. On, page 6, it describes page 6, it gives the description. They're coming out and servicing the boilers. If there's nothing wrong with it, when they service them, if there's nothing wrong with it, it's $2,970. If they find something wrong with it that needs to be repaired, that's added on. And with that in mind, if you look on page, let's see, it's 4, and I lost. I had it all here, no, pass out one that I had dog here, one of you guys.
Do you have a guarantee on it for some period of time? Does the company that's installing the elevator guarantee it for 5 years, or 10 years, or 2 years, or 6 months?
The boiler,
This we're talking about boiler.
we're talking about the boiler.
It's got a 30 warranty, Jim.
This
30 minutes, 30 feet.
The,
service contract is the same as it has been.
the same as it has been, we get a 20% discount of labor, look on page 4, and, 1 day, emergency on-site response, if we have an equipment. You know, if we didn't have to do any more repairs other than the service, they take 80, but they only charge us 80% of, I think it's $125 an hour to do it.
Has the price gone up, if so, how?
It has gone up, but I'm thinking it's neighborhoods from where we began, I think like 2,700. Same thing we've been doing.
I thought.
Yeah, no.
So a
So,
motion to approve the, service contract for the boiler at that price of $2,970.
and,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Can I ask you, is there any kind of a guarantee on the elevator?
yeah, there is.
There's a warranty on it.
Yeah, no warranty on it.
The serviceability law was 20 years.
It's warranted for 20 years?
Which means that they guarantee that they'll have replicable parts for 20 years.
Yeah, guarantee.
And after that, it depends on the industry.
Here on another 100.
Like a manufacturing guarantee though.
Yeah, but you wanna know, it's like, and I was thinking about that, but I will get a number and a time frame. There is a warranty that I'm sure that lasts for so long. If something happens to it the next X amount of time, like with an automobile, they'll come back out and fix it. But at some point,
Some of it is probably not covered.
some of it's not covered. I will get the specifics of that. I do not have.
They explained it to us. We asked them, and I just don't recall exactly what the particulars were. It seemed like maybe 5 years, everything was covered, and then some like
It
that.
sounds like that. Like I said, there's a time limit where everything's covered after that.
Certain things.
The, yes,
Just
sir.
one second, on the elevator project, so did we budget a line item for that specifically for this year?
Yep.
Not in my budget, but.
Yeah, we did.
Well, okay, yeah.
Yeah, we added that line
Yes.
just for
That
elevators.
should be getting, so it's sort of like the janitor,
Yep.
elevator specific at 100,000,
It will be more than that.
that's a, you know,
Yep, it was 250 and then we're gonna put more in it once the ARPA funds get switched.
that number's pretty meaningless.
That number will fluctuate.
At the end of the year, it would be close to 618,000.
618,000 plus this,
We'll
which is approved.
be paying as we go.
Right, I just.
Now, when I say it's not, well, I've treated it in my own mind too, so I did the budget for the building and then treated that as its own separate entity in my mind. But as far as the auditor's office, it goes into the courthouse budget. It's a boatload of cash. A couple of things just for your information about the boiler. We have, and I had fixed it, I bubbed it fixed for it downstairs. We had one of the valves for the steam pipes and they go to feed the radiators on the first floor. It started leaking in the AA room. The valve, that would have shut it off, didn't work. It may have not, it probably hasn't been shut off in decades. So, I turned the system off, got the JP well out and patched it. I called GNR Control, and that patch has held for 6 weeks. I called GNR Control, and they told me, said that is really a plumbing issue, and they were not equipped to do it. They were equipped to work on the boilers and the radiators themselves. They referred me to Mitchell Plumbing, and Mitchell Plumbing will be out here in about 3 weeks to take a look at it. I talked with our local plumbers and several other plumbers, and none of them wanted to touch anything that had steam going through it. For liability reasons, they're not certified. So what has happened is that, you know, it's just the pipe rusted. It's all under insulation downstairs. About sometime in the last 20 years, the old asbestos insulation was removed and it was covered up with new fiberglass installation. But until it started leaking, there was not, I couldn't see it. So I talked to the guy, Mitchell Plumbing, and he said he would take a look at our stuff when he comes out here. We definitely have one pipe that has to be replaced and one valve. So I have no idea what kind of, get his recommendation on how to examine the rest of that stuff down there to see if we're dealing with a bigger problem. Frankly, I just don't know yet. And it may be the easiest solution, is to wait for the next leak and fix that, which probably is the easiest solution. And I need to ask your forgiveness for spending too much. After, so this is gonna be trivial after, but it's still policy after 600,000 for the elevator. Those, plastic controls on the radiator, I keep, they last about 5 years, and I try to keep an inventory of at least 4 of them in the basement. This, winter, I had to use that inventory up, and I ordered some more. In the past, they were like $45. Now, they come from Denmark, and each one of them is over $100, but we need them. The other thing happened is that one of the benefits, I did not realize that until after the fact, but we need them. I also had GNR Control out here this week, and this is one of the benefits of this agreement, is that I've got a relationship with them. The north boiler stopped working. I called the tech, he was over in Highmore. He came back over on the way back to Sioux Falls, went downstairs and got the north boiler working again. It was a very low water probe. He cleaned it, and within an hour, it was back up and going. So, you know, that's what that's the kind of thing the service contract buys. I didn't have to do an emergency, I just called him and he fit it in. So, I guess the next thing is the generator, and the generator is pretty much the same thing, and this is a little bit confusing. I was confused by it anyway, and I called them and asked. They give it, on the first page here, for Interstate Power Systems, this is for annual service, it's $1,214.17 for 2023. We're only paying that amount for 2023. They're projecting out what their annual service fees are gonna be for 2024 and 2025. But we're only paying for it, only agreeing for 2023. Again, what this gets us is, I can change the oil myself, and I have changed the oil and the other filters. But they come out and they check all the electronics, they check the other things that I can't check. And if there's an emergency, the thing fails, we go to the top of the list, as opposed to somebody that doesn't have a service contract to get them out here to fix it. So the price that we're asking for is $1,214.17 for Interstate Power Systems.
That actually hasn't gone up as much as I would have expected. I think, it seemed like when we started this agreement with them, we were at, right at 1,000, I think.
Yes, sir.
And
So what are they looking at? They want to do a 3-year, or are they just?
Well, they were just giving it for our information. It's not clear. They were just doing that for our information.
so we're only approving it.
Read the second sentence.
Yeah.
Or it looks like it's a 3-year.
It looks like a 3-year deal when I,
Yeah, and that's why I called them and asked them, and said, no, it's just 1 year.
it's just a 1-year.
I move we approve it for 1 year.
I second that motion. 2023 contract.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Gentlemen, that's all that I have. Is there, do you have any other questions for me? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike.
The next item you have, is Beetle County does an annual bid release for culverts. And typically, Karen Tinker Culvert, which is now True North Steel, submits to them, and then it is shared across the state. So by approving this, it allows our county to buy off of Beetle County.
So approved. So moved, yeah.
Second.
Yeah,
Oh,
I don't know what I was thinking,
Who did the second?
I second-
Okay.
And we all said yay.
I seconded it, so approved.
yeah. Right.
Next, we're gonna move to make Grand King.
Hear ye, hear ye. Okay, these next items, these are related to just bid for bridge projects. And these are easements to allow for either the bridges to extend further into the right of ways on township roads, which belongs to the property owner. And it also includes an area for them to use for temporary construction. So really all we need here is to have permission for the chairman to sign those easements.
Is that by consensus?
You know, I'd make it a motion just for that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Who was number two, Greg?
Great.
Greg's move.
Greg, and who's second?
I did.
Okay.
Mr. Chair. 5-minute break.
It's fine by me.
Hey Doug, have you seen, by chance, have you looked like what last year's steel bid were compared to this year's? I didn't look at it.
They made a mistake on their, I quit this. But I couldn't believe it when I couldn't believe it. But he did tell me, I'm not. I said, "So, you know, this is what he figured. Just so,
The back stretcher.
but it was a long time to get 2 months. Yeah. So that's what I'm using that. I pulled 7 months.
Bigger destination, but don't lower.
I
aggravated by shoveling.
Right. But that's the if you were a vet, man, I'd have been the other way.
It's so slow going in reverse when I pull on it.
Get up.
My sister starts to tell me
Oops, you get that numbing feeling?
I went in last Thursday, just the day after Thursday, went
Is
to,
that everything? If I got this, and that back to you?
It might be.
It's everything's signed in here, and there's no more papers.
Okay,
No more little tags.
you're good. If not, I know where to get you.
Oh, yeah.
And I know somebody willing to shuttle stuff back and forth. Well, I guess I assume she's willing. Oh. She hasn't said anything yet, so.
I don't know how I think you do.
Walking roof?
We get another one quick? Oh, okay.
trying to think of the use of it. Something.
Oh,
The Baptist.
yeah.
We're hoping, our biggest hope is spinal stenosis. That's not good either. So, like,
Lesser evils.
what's it? So, but they, yeah. I keep getting. I mean, so.
Did Mike say that after doing that recording on my phone, I can't find it? I had it, and then after I lost the press, I didn't have it.
Put it on a flash drive,
We're gonna have to.
and then.
Because I just want that one segment where it talks about consolidating county.
Right. And I get.
So I might just come down
In my
and
story.
do it.
And I was going to, I thought, yeah, it's good, he's going to keep going. And I just.
Yeah, so I'll stop down, hopefully this week, and just, I might just play a recording and capture that segment of it. Right, Jim?
So, yep.
Yep.
Are you in the oil changing business?
Or as Will pronounces it, old.
Oh. It's really tough to get an oil change in this town.
Yeah, it is. They don't even do them at Twin Valley anymore.
There's no money in it, part of it, I'm sure.
They're also short of help.
That's why I'm asking rural repair,
If you're asking would I help a friend, yes.
but you don't want to do it as a sideline?
No.
Okay.
So the real question is, now you gotta determine if you're my friend or not.
Right. And if I wasn't a bird to my friends with changing my oil.
Yeah. No, I would run it out and help you do it. Actually, I have done oil changes for hire, and there just isn't any money in it. You charge a half hour, $75 shop rate, you charge a half hour of labor, and some synthetic oil and a filter, and, and you can't do I usually spend an hour or more on the vehicle by the time you check the front, rear differential, the transfer case, and the transmission, and brakes, take a look at them, and whatever else. You legitimately got an hour in it, and if you charge them, was it $38.50 or whatever it is, after 75, then, you 5-6 quarts of synthetic oil and filter, pretty soon you're up to $68, $75, $82.
That's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, and that's charging a half hour of labor, which you can't give a vehicle a good look over in a half hour.
My son just had his oil change before he came to see us this weekend. And he had a cabin filter, changed his oil. Oil change cabin filter. That was it. $227.
Oh, my gosh.
So.
You
How hard is it to change their oil again? Yeah.
I do most of mine just because of the same reason.
Do you do your own?
Usually.
Not that I couldn't do my own, but like I said, I can't do
service to
all the way around it as easy.
The ability
Right.
to $200 an hour from the time he leaves the shop to the time he gets back to the shop. They don't charge mileage.
Now, one thing about,
So what's that an hour long as long as
I don't know, like maybe
Bill to that customer.
check everything like I should always.
I said,
Like all your bearings and
I just really.
there's no research on anything anymore, for the most part. It's all self,
Bill.
so you don't have to research anything other than checking all your other things.
Okay, so this is one of our topics from our executive session, so what I'm asking you to do is, the funeral home didn't submit a voucher for payment this meeting, so what I'm asking for is for you to approve the $2,000 voucher for that indigent burial, so we can pay the minimum.
So,
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And
And then the next one is the internet/security network. That was one of our executive sessions, and so what I've got here is a request to ban the use of TikTok on county infrastructure. And the reason that is because if you read the news, you'll see that TikTok is a company that comes out of China, and it doesn't honor international security and privacy standards. And it's been known to be data harvesters, so I found out that Venture can stop access. That's YouTube. Violator. They can stop it at the firewall. So all I need is your approval to adopt the temporary, and I made it temporary on purpose because I suspect that either TikTok will come into compliance with international standards for privacy and security, or the United States will issue a national ban like Canada and several others.
So this is essentially the same thing the state did with all the state phones.
They made it a permanent policy, but as a temporary policy, we would only need it while it's an issue. So we could disintegrate without your action.
Need a motion?
Please.
Motion to approve. Or adopt that policy.
Second.
And it, sorry.
Go ahead.
And it does have support of at least the register, the assessor, treasurer, sheriff, auditor. I didn't expect Dave Johnson to chime in because I don't think the BSO officer spends much time on TikTok. So they did have support from other departments.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, we adopt.
Then I have a summary of the indigent care request summaries. They give me a big sheet. I just gave you the totals. The notices is when somebody's hospitalized, they service a notice of hospitalization. There's 1,100,000 in applications. The UB04 is the actual forms that we submit medical expenses on. And then the request is when the hospital takes all of that into account after there's been back and forth discussion, and that's what the requests are as they stand now.
What do we have budgeted for that line item?
Well, actually, we reduced it considerably and then boosted up the contingency. But right now, I don't have any pay requests in front of me.
So this is all just open requests from how, I mean, not just this year.
Right, and so I know one of them, I'm gonna send a denial, because the party that was involved was a workman's comp claim, and for whatever reason, the hospital that treated him wouldn't accept that. So they ended up getting lawyers involved on that side of the business to get it squared away.
The hospital wouldn't accept workers' comp?
They wouldn't accept the patient's assertion that it was involved, even though workman's comp was dictating how the treatment was taken.
Was that the upset of the car out here?
No. Pretty bizarre.
Question.
Yes,
All of our indigent care comes from Rivera, right?
right now, we don't.
We haven't had anything from,
Sanford. We do get requests from here in Richmond, but not to the same extent that we do from.
is it because we are affiliated with Rivera that people that go in here automatically get transferred to Rivera?
Anecdotally, I can tell you that from my listening to the pages for ambulance transfers, yes, this hospital is the feeder for the rest of the nurses.
One question.
But I'm also under the understanding that Sanford's got a way to absorb some of these.
Well, part of the not-for-profit 501c3 and all the other suffixes allows for charitable organizations to have the means to cover for those who can't. And so anecdotally, and I would say that Sanford has a much larger foundation to cover indigent care, plus they have an arrangement with the medical school. So like, for example, when my father passed away, they wrote off a good portion of his bill, one, because it was VA, and two, they just talked about education. And so my mom went to this huge bill to know. So.
Well, what I'm saying is, Rivera is not profit.
Right.
I'm just thinking, these numbers are numbers that the county can't handle.
Right.
And I'm just thinking, this is just rolling around in my head. Is Avera doing everything they can to lower these bills to the county as far as?
No. When we get the first notice, it's full price.
Full retail.
Yep, full retail. And then we go through this process where we try and work it down to the Medicaid rate, Medicare rate. And then sometimes there's a debate on what is or what isn't. So that's when somebody who is experienced in code reading medical bills goes through it line by line and says, yes, this is covered, this is not. So we are to cover only those absolutely necessary for preservation of life. Right? So just like your doctor might say, well, this is a discretionary procedure, and your insurance company would say, we're not going to cover your discretionary procedure. Same thing applies in indigent care. So that's where this process comes in and why it has 4 different levels.
Are we still deploying that lady up in Watertown?
She's accessible to us, she went to Sioux Falls. Yep.
Has she reviewed anyone, or haven't we really needed her to?
Kind of lost communication with her. So I think she did some help with the attorneys out in some of those last settlements, but I don't know to what extent.
So she's the one, like you're saying, that would go through,
Like
line
that.
by line, and
But we also send them to peers as part of the social services, and then they help when it's not busy, but they're always busy. That's why it takes time. So the applications that we talked about in the last meeting in executive session, those are tough ones because there's so many of them, and there are so many things that could overlap. But, I mean, it's almost like you gotta have a big whiteboard and draw it all out. Make sure there isn't any duplications.
But this is just for our information.
Yep, but I can tell you, Luke, that personally, when I get my statements from Avera, there's a sheet in there that talks about ways and means to take advantage of their payment system, as well as their charity. But that letter is not extended to the people that receive emergency care and get referred to us.
Well, they don't.
I've asked them, and it's the first time they've seen it is when I show it to them. So every time I get a bill, I keep the copy and I hand them to people. Have you ever seen this?
so, excuse my ignorance, but the application comes to the county from
The hospital.
the hospital.
Yeah.
So at that point, I mean, is there a specific point in which that process starts, that application, like if it's not paid within a certain period of time, or what they?
If you'll give me a little latitude, I'll explain to them what I've noticed in 4 years. You show up at the ER, and they may or they may not interview you. If you tell them, here's my insurance card, you're covered. But they'll still send me a notice of hospitalization. So I used to send out a notice after I got that notice, but I don't do that anymore because I found out so many of them, I would not see the next day. So then, the hospital now has the opportunity to fill an application even without your consent. So then I send a letter to the patient, and they say, John Doe Hospital has submitted a request for indigent care on their behalf. If this isn't appropriate, you need to contact the hospital. That's when I start getting feedback from the patient. And they'll tell me, well, I have insurance, or it was a car accident, my car insurance is gonna pay for it, I work with comp, and they're gonna pay. That's how I find that out. Otherwise, I don't get that information. So, a lot of heartburn is caused because the facility can submit an application without the participation of the patient. But the patient on our side is required to participate in the application process. And if they fail to participate in our side of the application process, we can issue a denial. But then the hospital come back, their attorney comes back and argues that their participation isn't required. That still sound familiar?
Very familiar.
Yep. So the whole thing becomes adversarial at the very beginning because the county has the burden to prove that they are indigent. The person treated does not have to do anything.
Yeah, and how do you prove somebody doesn't have anything if they're not there to talk to or file an application or give you an assets Yeah, that's.
Plus, I just wonder, is like, is it being submitted to the county before the House bill pursues payment plans and all that?
Yes, I think it is literally automatic. From my interviews with people who actually will talk to me, most of them have no idea. They're like, that conversation never happened. And I believe that because of the workman's comp claims, because of the car accident claims, because I'll have somebody who come in that's an enrolled member of the tribe, and they're covered under Indian Health Services. So, when they tell me that conversation didn't happen, I believe them because I have people that validate that.
I have a question. So you say when somebody shows up at the ER and, then they send you a notice. The local hospital send you a notice? Or like if I went to the Huron ER, the Huron ER would send you one as well?
Here's even done, yep.
Okay.
This is just an example. I had a claim, or a notice come to me for a child who was treated for a broken appendage. And when I contacted the parents of said child, they're like, I told them, we got it covered. Either through insurance or out of my pocket. They still sent it. So I tell those people, well, then you need to call the hospital and tell them not. Because they're sharing stuff with me that they shouldn't.
Right, because I mean, like HIPAA, you're not allowed to.
Yep.
On the other hand, we can't pay it unless we have some documentation as to its legitimacy. And how do you do that without a name or a time, a date, what services were rendered, under what circumstances? So
But it should be after the person has said, I can't afford to pay this, we're gonna have to go, so can we go take some of this to the county? Yes, we send it to the county and all the time. That should be the conversation. I mean, I'm just
Right.
saying, from my personal.
And from the people I've interviewed in this process, none of them have heard that.
And see,
No social worker comes in, no financial
it would be
person comes
the
in.
last thing on anybody's mind in the emergency.
right.
Who's gonna do this? The medical people are gonna be thinking about it, and there isn't a guy with a green visor there at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you hauled in, falling in your bathtub and breaking your hip. There isn't anybody from the business office there, it's the healthcare providers that are there. They're not thinking about it, and neither is the person who is afflicted. It's the last thing on the mind.
Oh, agreed.
And they would be, I think, angry if you stopped all the process and procedures and interventions that must be undertaken to talk about business. You know?
But in the same token of that, every single person here knows about whoever has applied, whoever the hospital sent you there. You know about their medical conditions, and that's different.
Well, we're sworn to not.
I understand you're sworn to not know, but they're sworn to not tell you.
No, they have to tell us.
Not until the person says, I can't pay the bill.
See, and that's where,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
that's where
You
they,
have to see where I'm coming from with
But
that.
they don't bother to say I can't pay the bill. They just throw that stuff away if they did anything.
Right.
They don't have any part in it. They have no dog in the fight. These people, most of them. They know they're not gonna be held
But
personally
they're
liable for it.
saying,
They're not gonna.
every person who comes to, every person who comes to the ER is getting that sent to death. So any person who comes to the ER for any reason, that knows why they went to the ER, that they went to the ER, whatever it was. That's
There
not
are exceptions to the HIPAA law for those kinds of interactions and interfaces to occur for business purposes.
right, they're using the pretense and care to share that information. And then we find out after the fact that
They're not.
if they did interview the person, they would realize that they have it taken care of. Okay, any other questions on that? On the screen, you see a deed. This is the deed for 1 acre of ground in Howell Township that is surrounded by the Lammer's pasture.
That's the one we own.
Yep. So my question for you is, you want to keep all of it?
Why do we own it? What was the
It
original?
was given to us by virtue of Howell Township's dissolving.
Did they have like a township hall or a school or something there?
As
or
far as I can tell, there's been no structure on it. I can't read this very well.
How would we dispose of it?
Well, to be honest with you, it makes the most sense to see if Lammers one purchases, it is,
Is it totally
No.
insular?
no, it's actually the driveway approaches the rest of the pasture. And then it's just one little inner square. I would imagine at some point, I was trying to look and see if it was in
Where's
the school land section.
It's right there, I think it's right across from,
It's in section 21, so it wasn't.
it's right on the interstate,
What
right
is
on
it
the
now?
highway, right on the highway,
Where that little center tree.
just north of the park, yeah, on the corner of it.
I,
Wonder what kind of value it would have. It would have no value to anyone other than,
No.
so whatever they
if
offer.
we're gonna give, if we're gonna dispose of it, they're the ones that are gonna get it. It's not gonna be up for,
We wouldn't get any-
I think it's a lot like that ground at Workmeyer's, where there was a temporary roadway through there, and it reverts back to the property owner when we have no purpose.
and I think this probably should have done the same thing when they dissolved as a township, it should have reverted back to the landowner, whoever that would be.
Wonder how it came to be owned by us.
Yeah.
I actually.
Because.
Yep.
Was it road related?
Oh, it was school land, but it wasn't the federal designated section.
36 or whatever they were.
Yep, she has it, it's the second one. It says the school township, probably the township school of Howell in Han County.
Determine the fair market value and offer it to them. Yeah, fair market value.
Well, they're running everything out.
I think if they offered us $1, we need to take it because there's nobody else that would want it.
I think the value is the fact that it's no longer ours.
Yeah, that is the value.
And we get it back on the tax roll.
So we would, I mean, we're not overstepping anything in terms of surplusing it and,
But we have to.
but making it available to the.
You can't sell land unless you can also sell access to the person who's buying. We can't do that.
We would be cutting them off.
Yes. I think you're right. I don't think there's anything we can do other than give it back.
Well, you okay if I submit it to the state's attorney to try and.
And see, there may have to be a monetary amount of money have to be out, you know, whatever that number be.
I would say that's a good idea.
Has anyone talked to Lammers yet?
No, I wanted to make sure you guys were on board before I introduced
Are
you.
they farmers?
It's pasture.
Pasture.
And there's a watering tank there, if I remember right. So I'm gonna provide it to the state's attorney's office.
Yeah,
See what opinion they have. And then my last item for you before the executive session is to declare, 3 computers, desktop computers that were replaced in 2019. I finally had an opportunity to remove all our.
I make a motion to
Thank you, Greg.
second replace, get rid of the surplus them all.
Scrap
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none, motion passed.
And then the correspondence is the annual request from Gross South Dakota for $5,000 in bidding. That's a discussion we actually have later on in budgeting. So it's just there if you want to read it. And the only other thing is I have that carryover for the personnel item from the last meeting. So if you want, I'll contact them and they'll come up. Sure, that's fine.
I make a motion.
I make a motion to leave the regular session.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I spoke to her, she planned on doing it, she just hasn't arrived yet. Okay, I'm gonna shut this up.
Doug, is that the only matter, or you guys?
That's it.
know, is that the only matter executive? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.